We are talking about The Ghost Within, also known as Fear the Dark. This one is directed by Lawrence Fowler. Fowler had previously directed Jack in the Box movie, a film that I actually kind of quite liked, I have to say. So here he is with a classic ghost story. Now this focuses on this woman who has been traumatised by an event of her past. She can't really remember what's going on, but she knows that there was some type of traumatic event where her younger sister was apparently murdered by her father, and she's getting visions and kind of nightmares and stuff, and she spent time in a psychiatric hospital, and she's kind of like on the verge of being sent back to a psychiatric hospital. So she decides she's going to go back to her familial home to try and find out exactly kind of what happened and kind of put it to bed. She goes there with her husband, who is a kind of unsuccessful book author, and when they're there, they get especially our sort of protagonist, this woman, gets visions and kind of is haunted by what appears to be the spirit of her dead sister, who seems a little bit aggressive, you might say. Inevitably, things kind of happen, the hauntings get worse and worse. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's talk about what I think worked in this movie. As I mentioned, the director here actually did do a couple of movies that I have reviewed on the channel I quite liked. They were quite well put together, low budget, kind of British kind of horror films, and this is true of this one as well to a large degree. It's a fairly well budget, low budget kind of movie in a lot of ways, but I think it is kind of like feels like the classic era kind of ghost stories. What an interesting kind of thing here. I noticed the stylings were not really time specific. I mean, it's clearly taking place in the modern era, because we see modern cars, we see kind of like pieces of machinery, modern cameras and things like this, but the kind of like the architecture, the kind of the clothes that people are wearing, we don't really see like mobile phones and things like this. It gives it this kind of like, it's somewhat of an indistinct kind of time frame really, although it doesn't specifically say that. But it gives it this kind of like this old-fashioned kind of classic kind of ghost story feel to it. If you're from the UK, every so often we get a kind of a BBC drama where you'd have this kind of haunting tale, and it kind of reminds me a little bit like that. So it has this kind of like this literally classic kind of feel to it in some respects. I feel some of the actual kind of like effects here, again, and we have to remember this is a lower budget movie, particularly kind of well done. This ghost, of her sister, when she was alive, was actually disfigured, so our ghost is kind of even more so. So it looks pretty scary, I have to say. There's some neat effects here that they use. One in particular where we see kind of like footprints that are kind of going through sand, and it looks like it's done practically. I have to say that was done pretty well. So there's some reasonable kind of effects in regards to that. There's some okay kind of jump scares and things like this. And I think this kind of where it's shot in this kind of large kind of stately manor style home, again, it adds to that kind of that sort of classic kind of feel to it. There's somewhat of a mystery involved here. There is a twist. I have to say I saw the twist coming sometime before the end, but there is a kind of a little bit of a surprise in regards to what you might think happens. I won't go into, I won't spoil it obviously, but yeah. So there's kind of a little bit of a mystery about what is kind of going on in regards to the setup and everything like that. We get the kind of like these quite fun kind of ghost hunter characters that I quite liked. This older guy and this kind of his son, and they quite like old sort of stuffy Englishmen, but I quite enjoyed them, I have to say. I thought they were quite kind of fun sort of characters and things like this. So it's a well put together film on a technical level as well, I have to say. Fowler, I say, relatively established now, so he's kind of honing his craft. What doesn't work for me, I don't think this is like the most exciting movie ever, if we're being completely honest. And I think partly for that is it's quite predictable. The film follows a pretty tried and tested kind of template, I think, of a story. We for example, our main character, she goes to these kind of ghost hunters, and they initially refuse to help her, and we know that they will eventually, but we have to go for that kind of like those scenes where they initially kind of refuse and things like this, and you know, as I've mentioned, I think the twist is relatively kind of obvious, so that, you know, it doesn't feel especially original. I think it could have actually done it with a little bit more music in it, I have to say. Now, I'm not a person who really notices scores all that much, but I noticed a distinct lack of score in this one. There is musical cues and everything, but there are certain scenes here where I felt would have benefited from having a musical score, in which they don't on this one, which kind of gives it more of a flat kind of feel and doesn't kind of really emphasise the mood, which, you know, a horror film would do. It uses music to kind of like, you know, to kind of plus up the scene, and kind of, some people don't like it because they feel it telegraphs scares, but the flip side of that, I think it kind of can give you that kind of like the extra oomph that you might need in a particular kind of scene. So for me, it was a little lacking in the musical department, with scenes not having any music a lot of the time. I have to say, I think the acting was mixed. There are some characters that I felt did an okay job, but there's some that I felt were a little bit stiff and stilted. I don't know, the dialogue to me, it just didn't feel like it was natural dialogue. It felt like it was kind of, you know, written off a page, and the actors were just kind of parroting it, which is what I know actors do as a profession. But I don't know, it just didn't feel like natural dialogue. And I think it's partially down to some of the clunky dialogue from the script, and partially down to some of the delivery of the actors, where I felt like they just weren't strong enough. You know, not every say. There are some actors that I think do an okay job, but there's some actors where I feel could have been better. So, you know, the acting is a little bit of a mixed bag. And again, and I'm going to point to, when you don't have the music, it kind of shows up a little more, I feel. And then, without spoiling anything, I will say I think the end didn't work. There's a couple of things for me, and again, I can't explain because I don't want to spoil it for you, that, for a start, without spoilers, the physics, I think, that has a distinct lack of physics involved, this particular problem. And then there's a decision that is taken, which is for some reason way worse than the obvious the decision that would have been taken. Again, I'm trying to be vague here. So there's a couple of things that happen in the finale. I'm thinking, I don't think that really makes sense. There's two things for me that really don't make sense. But the very, very end of the movie, I'm actually going to quite like, because it kind of goes against type a little bit. So, you know, what do we think of this movie? It's a watchable kind of ghost story. I don't think it's going to kind of like be one that is going to be watched every year. I don't think it's going to be anyone's kind of top 10 kind of favourite ghost stories. But it's a serviceable movie. You know, it's a good watch. For a kind of, if you don't mind, kind of lower budget stuff. The effects and stuff I think are done well. It's just, I feel like some of the elements, other elements I've mentioned, just knock it down a little bit. But it's okay. It's just like it's a pretty good movie. I just don't think it's outstanding in any particular way. I'll give it a 5 out of 10, which is kind of an average score for me. So yeah, 5 out of 10. It's, you know, it's not bad. It's not great, but it's not terrible or anything. It's watchable. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to you next time. Bye for now.